The evening shift at the Grand Hotel always started the same way. At exactly 7 o'clock, the lobby pianist would walk through the marble entrance, nod at the front desk staff, and make his way to the beautiful black grand piano that sat in the center of the lounge area. His name was Robert, and he had been playing that piano for 15 long years. 15 years of the same routine, the same songs, the same polite applause from hotel guests who barely looked up from their phones. But Robert didn't mind. That piano was his world, his sanctuary, his one place where everything made sense. Robert treated that instrument like it was made of glass. He kept a soft cloth in his pocket to wipe away fingerprints. He adjusted the bench to the exact same position every single night. He even kept a small bottle of hand sanitizer nearby, though he would never admit that to anyone. The hotel staff knew better than to let anyone else touch it. That piano belonged to Robert, at least in his mind. On this particular Thursday evening, the lobby was quieter than usual. A few business travelers sat scattered across the leather couches, typing away on their laptops. An elderly couple shared tea by the window. Everything was perfectly normal, exactly how Robert liked it. He started with a Beethoven piece, his fingers moving across the keys with practiced ease. The music filled the space, elegant and controlled. Robert played the way he always did, hitting every note precisely, following the sheet music exactly as written. There was comfort in that predictability, in knowing exactly how each piece would unfold. At 7:30, Robert took his usual 15-minute break. He stood up, stretched his back, and walked toward the small staff area behind the front desk where he kept his coffee thermos. As he walked away, he didn't notice the young woman who had been sitting in the corner for the past hour. She had been there since 6 o'clock, long before Robert arrived. Her clothes looked like they had been worn for several days. Her jacket, once probably a nice shade of blue, had faded to something closer to gray. Her backpack sat at her feet, stuffed full and held together with safety pins in 2 places. Her sneakers had holes near the toes, but her eyes, they told a different story. They were fixed on that piano with an intensity that would have made Robert uncomfortable if he had seen it. She watched his hands move across the keys like someone watching water in a desert. Her own fingers twitched slightly in her lap, moving in time with the music only she could hear in her head. When Robert left for his break, the woman stood up slowly. She looked around the lobby, checking if anyone was watching. The business travelers were absorbed in their work. The elderly couple had left. The front desk clerk was helping a new guest check in. She walked toward the piano like she was approaching something sacred. Each step was careful, measured. When she reached it, she just stood there for a moment, staring at the keys. Her hand lifted, trembling slightly, moving closer to the ivory and black keys that gleamed under the lobby lights. Her fingertips were inches away when a sharp voice cut through the air. "Don't touch my piano." The woman jumped back like she had been slapped. Robert stood there, his coffee cup still in his hand, his face red with anger and something else. Possessiveness, maybe, or fear that someone might damage his precious instrument. "I'm sorry," the woman whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to, I just wanted to." "This is a very expensive instrument," Robert said, his tone softening only slightly when he saw how startled she looked. "It's not for public use. I'm the pianist here. If you want to hear music, you can listen from your seat." The woman's face flushed deep red. She mumbled another apology, grabbed her backpack and hurried back to her corner chair. But she didn't leave the hotel. She just sat there, her head down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Robert returned to the piano, satisfied that he had protected his instrument. He didn't see himself as cruel. In his mind, he was just being responsible. That piano was his livelihood, his purpose. He couldn't let random people touch it, no matter how innocent their intentions seemed. He settled back onto the bench and launched into a Mozart sonata. But something felt different now. The notes came out the same as always, technically perfect, but there was a heaviness in the air that hadn't been there before. From the front desk, Patricia had watched the entire exchange. She was the hotel manager, a woman in her early 50s who prided herself on creating a welcoming atmosphere for everyone who walked through those doors. What she had just witnessed didn't sit right with her at all. During Robert's next break, Patricia approached him in the staff area. "That was harsh," she said simply, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "I was protecting the piano," Robert replied, defensive. "You know how valuable that instrument is. She wasn't going to damage it. She just wanted to touch it." "You don't know that." She could have spilled something on it or pressed the keys too hard or— "Robert," Patricia interrupted, her voice firm but not unkind. "That woman has been coming here every evening for the past week. She never causes trouble. She just sits and listens to you play. And tonight, for the first time, she got up enough courage to get close to something she clearly loves, and you embarrassed her in front of everyone." Robert felt a flicker of guilt but pushed it away. "The piano is my responsibility." Patricia shook her head. "Music isn't meant to be guarded like a treasure in a vault. It's meant to be shared." She walked away before Robert could respond, leaving him alone with his coffee and his thoughts. He tried to brush off her words, but they stuck with him as he returned to the piano for the final hour of his shift. The woman stayed in her corner until the very end. When Robert played his closing piece at 9 o'clock, she finally stood up and walked toward the exit. Robert caught a glimpse of her face as she passed under the lobby lights. There were no tears, but there was something worse. A look of resigned sadness, like someone who had lost something precious a long time ago and had just been reminded of that loss all over again. Robert packed up his sheet music and wiped down the piano keys, just as he did every night, but Patricia's words kept echoing in his mind. The walk to his car felt longer than usual. The drive home felt hollow. That night, lying in bed, Robert couldn't stop thinking about the woman's face, about the way her hand had reached for the piano with such longing, about the way she had pulled back when he yelled, like she was used to being told she didn't belong. He told himself he had done the right thing. He told himself he was just protecting something valuable. But deep down, in a place he didn't want to examine too closely, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, he had been protecting the wrong thing all along. The piano would still be there tomorrow, perfect and untouched. But something else had been damaged that evening, something that couldn't be polished away with a soft cloth. Robert just didn't know it yet. Outside, in the cold night air, the woman walked toward the shelter where she had been staying. Her fingers still tingled with the phantom memory of keys she hadn't been allowed to touch, and somewhere inside her worn backpack, hidden between spare clothes and essential documents, was a faded photograph of a younger version of herself, sitting at a concert hall piano, smiling like the whole world was full of music and possibility. Friday morning came with unexpected news. Robert arrived at the hotel early, planning to practice a new piece before the evening crowd arrived. But Patricia was waiting for him in the lobby, and the expression on her face told him this wasn't going to be a normal day. "We need to talk," she said, gesturing toward her office. Robert followed, his stomach tightening with a vague sense of dread. Had someone complained about his playing? Was the hotel cutting his hours? In 15 years, he had never been called into the manager's office like this. Patricia closed the door and sat behind her desk. She didn't waste time with small talk. "Mrs. Holloway is hosting an event here tomorrow night," she began. Mrs. Holloway was one of those names that made people sit up straighter. Old money, extensive charity work, connections that reached into every corner of the city's elite social circles. When Mrs. Holloway wanted something at the Grand Hotel made it happen. "She's using the Grand Ballroom for her foundation's charity event," Patricia continued. "About 80 guests, all potential donors. She specifically requested something special for the evening." Robert relaxed slightly. "You want me to play? I can prepare something impressive. Maybe some Rachmaninoff or—" "She wants a demonstration," Patricia interrupted. "Her foundation focuses on helping people who've fallen on hard times rediscover their potential through the arts. She wants to show her donors what that looks like in real life." The knot in Robert's stomach returned. "I don't understand," Patricia leaned forward. "She wants you to invite that woman from yesterday." "The one you yelled at?" "She wants her to play something at the event." Robert's mouth fell open. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. Patricia, that woman is homeless. Or close to it. What does she know about performing in front of wealthy donors? She'll embarrass herself. She'll embarrass the hotel. This is ridiculous." Patricia's expression hardened. "Mrs. Holloway was here yesterday evening. She saw the whole thing. She saw that woman's face when she looked at the piano, and she saw how you treated her. Mrs. Holloway specifically requested this. And when someone who donates $50,000 a year to various hotel events makes a specific request, we honor it." Robert stood up, pacing. "This is my reputation on the line. What if she doesn't even know how to play? What if she gets up there and can't perform? The guests will think it's some kind of joke." "Then it will be a learning moment," Patricia said calmly. But something tells me you're wrong about her. Based on what? The way she was dressed? The fact that she's been sleeping in a shelter? Patricia's eyes flashed, based on the way she looked at that piano like it was the only thing in the world that mattered. I've seen a lot of people in this lobby, Robert. Business people, tourists, families. I've never seen anyone look at your piano the way she does. There's a story there. Robert sank back into his chair. And if she doesn't come back? You said she's been here every evening. What if last night scared her away? Then you'll go find her, Patricia said simply. I have a feeling she won't be far. The conversation ended there, but Robert's mind raced all day. He went through his evening performance on autopilot, his eyes constantly scanning the lobby. The woman didn't show up. 7 o'clock came and went. 7:30. 8 o'clock. At 8:15, Robert saw her. She slipped through the entrance quietly, keeping close to the walls, and made her way to a different corner than usual, farther from the piano. Farther from him, Robert's hands faltered on the keys. He recovered quickly, but his heart was pounding. During his break, he knew what he had to do, even though everything in him resisted it. He approached her corner slowly. She saw him coming and tensed, her hand moving instinctively toward her backpack like she was preparing to leave. Wait, Robert said, holding up his hands. Please, I need to talk to you. She didn't run, but she didn't relax either. Up close, Robert could see she was younger than he had first thought. Mid-20s, maybe. Her eyes were cautious but intelligent, missing nothing. I want to apologize, Robert began, the words feeling awkward in his mouth. For yesterday, I was protective of the piano, but I shouldn't have spoken to you that way. The woman nodded slightly but said nothing. Robert took a breath. The hotel is hosting a charity event tomorrow night. In the grand ballroom, there will be about 80 people there, all supporters of a foundation that helps people through the arts. He paused, feeling foolish. They would like you to play something. On the piano, the woman's eyes widened. Me? Yes, I know it's strange. I know we don't know each other. But the woman organizing the event, she saw you yesterday and she specifically requested that you be invited to perform. For a long moment, the woman just stared at him. Then quietly she asked, why would she want that? She runs a foundation that believes everyone deserves a chance to experience art, to be part of it. She thought you might like the opportunity. The woman looked down at her hands, at her calloused fingers and chipped nails. I haven't played in front of people in a long time. Robert's curiosity flared. But you have played. Yes, her voice was barely a whisper. A long time ago. Will you do it? Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock? The woman was quiet for so long that Robert thought she would refuse. Then she looked up at him, and there was something in her eyes that he couldn't quite read. Fear, maybe. Or determination. Or both. Okay, she said simply. I'll do it. Robert felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. Good, that's good. Do you need anything? The dress code is formal, and I know that might be. I'll figure it out, she said quickly, clearly uncomfortable with the implied charity. The manager, Patricia, she can help with that. She's the one who arranged this. You can trust her, the woman nodded. She stood up, and for the first time, Robert noticed how tall she was. How she carried herself with a certain dignity despite her circumstances. I'm Robert, by the way, he said, extending his hand. She shook it briefly. Her grip was firm. I'm Lauren. After she left, Robert returned to the piano, but his mind was elsewhere. What had he just done? He had agreed to let a stranger, someone he knew nothing about, perform at a high-profile charity event. His professional reputation was tied to this hotel, to this piano. If tomorrow night was a disaster, it would reflect on him. But there was something about the way Lauren had looked when she agreed. Something that suggested she knew exactly what she was getting into. Something that made Robert wonder if maybe, just maybe, Patricia had been right. That night, Robert couldn't sleep. He kept imagining different scenarios for tomorrow's event. Lauren freezing up at the piano. Lauren playing a simple children's song. Lauren running away before the event even started. Every scenario ended badly in his mind. But there was one scenario he didn't imagine. One possibility that never crossed his mind as he lay awake in the dark. The idea that maybe, just maybe, he was about to discover that his 15 years of careful, controlled playing had only scratched the surface of what that piano could actually do. Tomorrow night would change everything, but Robert didn't know that yet. All he knew was that he had extended an invitation to a stranger, and she had accepted. Now they both had to live with whatever came next. Saturday evening arrived too quickly. Robert spent the entire day in a state of nervous energy. He practiced his own piece for the event 3 times, though he could play Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major in his sleep. But practicing gave him something to do besides worry about what Lauren might or might not be able to play. By 7 o'clock, the grand ballroom was transforming. White-gloved servers arranged champagne glasses on silver trays. Round tables draped in cream-colored linens filled the space, each with a centerpiece of white roses. A small stage had been set up at the front of the room, with the hotel's second piano, another beautiful grand, positioned perfectly under soft spotlights. Robert stood off to the side, watching the wealthy guests arrive. Designer dresses, tailored suits, jewelry that probably cost more than his car. These were people who attended symphonies and operas, who knew the difference between a good performance and a great one. His stomach churned. Patricia appeared beside him, looking elegant in a navy dress. "Stop worrying," she said quietly. "Has she arrived yet?" "She's in the back room. I found her address, did her hair a little. She looks lovely." Robert nodded, not feeling reassured at all. "What if this is a mistake?" "Then it's a mistake we'll all learn from," Patricia said. "But I don't think it will be." At 7:30, Mrs. Holloway made her entrance. She was a woman in her late 60s with silver hair swept into an elegant twist and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She commanded attention without raising her voice, the kind of presence that came from decades of moving in powerful circles. Robert had played at several of her events over the years, but they had never spoken beyond polite greetings. Tonight she walked directly to him. "You must be Robert," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for facilitating this evening's special moment." "Of course, Mrs. Holloway," Robert managed, shaking her hand. "Though I should mention I don't actually know what Lauren plans to play, or even if she—" "Perfect," Mrs. Holloway interrupted with a smile. "The best moments are unrehearsed. Authenticity cannot be scripted." She moved away to greet other guests, leaving Robert more anxious than before. By 8 o'clock, all 80 guests were seated, the champagne was flowing, and the room buzzed with sophisticated conversation. Mrs. Holloway took the small stage, and the room gradually quieted. "Good evening, friends," she began, her voice warm and confident. "Thank you all for joining us tonight. As you know, the Holloway Foundation has spent the last 20 years helping individuals rediscover their potential through the arts. We've worked with hundreds of people who, through various circumstances, found themselves separated from the creative passions that once defined them." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Tonight you're going to witness something special, something real. We have a guest who will share her gift with us. She's not a hired performer. She's someone who reminded me why we do this work in the first place." Mrs. Holloway gestured toward the side entrance. "Please welcome Lauren." The room applauded politely as Lauren emerged. Patricia had worked wonders. The simple black dress fit her well, and her hair, clean and styled, fell softly around her shoulders. But it was her face that struck Robert. She looked terrified and determined in equal measure, her jaw set, her eyes fixed on the piano. She walked across the ballroom floor, and Robert could see her hands trembling. Several guests exchanged curious glances. A few whispered to each other. Robert's heart pounded so hard he thought everyone could hear it. Lauren reached the piano and stood there for a moment, just looking at it. The room was completely silent now, waiting. Someone coughed. A glass clinked somewhere in the back. Then Lauren sat down on the bench. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Her hands moved to the keys and rested there, still and quiet. 5 seconds passed. 10. The silence stretched so long that Robert started to panic. She was freezing. She couldn't do it. This was going to be a disaster. But then her fingers began to move. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, a simple melody in a minor key that seemed to hang in the air like a question. Robert didn't recognize the piece. It wasn't anything he had ever heard before. Then something shifted. Lauren's fingers gained confidence and the melody began to grow. It started to climb and twist, adding layers of complexity that made Robert lean forward in his seat. This wasn't a beginner playing. This was someone who understood music at a level he had rarely witnessed. The piece evolved, moving from that haunting minor melody into something more urgent. Her left hand created a rhythm that drove forward while her right hand wove patterns that seemed to tell a story. It was classical in its structure but infused with elements of jazz and blues, creating something entirely unique. Robert's mouth went dry. This was extraordinary. Lauren's entire body was involved now. She swayed slightly with the music, her eyes still closed, completely lost in the performance. Her fingers moved across the keys with stunning speed and precision, executing runs and arpeggios that would have challenged even the most skilled pianists. The music built to a crescendo that filled the entire ballroom. It was powerful, almost overwhelming, expressing emotions that words couldn't capture. Pain and joy, loss and hope, darkness and light, all woven together in a tapestry of sound that left the audience breathless. Then it softened again, returning to that original melody, but transformed now. What had started as a question became an answer. The final notes fell like gentle rain and then silence. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the applause started. Not polite social clapping, but genuine thunderous applause. People rose to their feet. A woman in the front row was crying openly, not bothering to wipe her tears. A man near the back stood with his hand over his heart, his eyes wide with wonder. Robert stood frozen, his mind reeling. He had been playing piano for over 30 years. He had studied at a prestigious music school. He had performed in concert halls and hotels across the country. And in one 7-minute performance, this woman who had been sleeping in a shelter had just shown him that he had barely scratched the surface of what was possible. Lauren opened her eyes, seeming to come back from somewhere far away. She looked out at the standing crowd, appearing almost surprised to find herself there. She stood, gave a small, uncertain bow, and started to walk off the stage. Mrs. Holloway intercepted her, taking Lauren's hands in her own. They spoke quietly, too low for anyone else to hear over the continuing applause. Robert could see Lauren shaking her head at something Mrs. Holloway said, but the older woman was persistent, smiling and nodding. Finally, Lauren nodded in agreement to whatever was being asked. Mrs. Holloway returned to the microphone, waiting for the applause to die down. "Thank you, Lauren, for that extraordinary gift. I think we can all agree that was something truly special." More applause erupted. "Lauren has agreed to stay and speak with us for a few moments about her journey. I believe her story will illuminate exactly why the work we do matters." Robert watched as Lauren returned to the stage, this time standing beside Mrs. Holloway at the microphone. She looked small and vulnerable in that spotlight, facing a room full of wealthy strangers. But there was something different about her now. Some invisible weight had lifted during that performance, like playing had reminded her of who she really was. "Thank you for listening," Lauren began, her voice soft but clear. "I should probably tell you who I am and how I ended up here tonight." The room leaned in, everyone eager to hear the story behind the performance they had just witnessed. Even the servers stopped moving, standing still along the walls. And Robert, sitting in the back of that ballroom, realized that he was about to learn something that would change everything he thought he knew about music, about talent, and about the person he had yelled at just 2 days earlier for daring to touch his piano. Lauren stood at the microphone, her hands clasped in front of her. The ballroom was so quiet that the sound of champagne bubbles fizzing in glasses seemed loud. Every eye was on her, waiting. "My story isn't unique," she began, her voice steady despite the trembling Robert could see in her shoulders. "But it's mine, and Mrs. Holloway asked me to share it with you." She took a breath. "I started playing piano when I was 4 years old. My mother was a music teacher, and she noticed I would climb onto the piano bench and try to copy the melodies she played. She said I had a gift, but back then I just knew I loved it. The piano felt like home to me." A few people in the audience smiled, nodding. "By the time I was 12, I was winning competitions. By 15, I was performing in concert halls. When I turned 18, I received a full scholarship to study at one of the best music schools in the country. Everyone said I had a bright future. People used words like prodigy and virtuoso. I believed them." Lauren's expression shifted, growing more serious. "My mother was so proud. She had worked 3 jobs to give me piano lessons before the scholarship came through. She sacrificed everything so I could chase this dream, and I was going to make it all worth it. I was going to become the pianist she always believed I could be." Robert felt his chest tighten. He knew somehow that the story was about to take a turn. "Then, in my 2nd year of school, my mother got sick." Lauren's voice remained steady, but her eyes glistened. "The doctors said it was cancer. Aggressive. They gave her 2 years, maybe 3 with treatment. But the treatment was expensive and she didn't have good insurance. She had spent everything on me." The room seemed to hold its collective breath. I left school immediately. There wasn't even a question in my mind. She had given me everything. Now it was my turn to give back. I moved home, started working whatever jobs I could find. I worked at a grocery store during the day, cleaned offices at night, and picked up weekend shifts at a restaurant. Between the 3 jobs, I could barely cover the medical bills and rent for our small apartment. Lauren looked down at her hands. I stopped playing piano. There was no time, and honestly, I couldn't. Every time I sat at the piano, I felt guilty. How could I play music when my mother was suffering? How could I think about my dreams when she was fighting for her life? Several women in the audience were crying now. Even some of the men had tears in their eyes. She lived for 3 years, 3 hard, painful years, but we had time together. I was there for every doctor's appointment, every bad night, every small good moment. When she passed away 6 months ago, I was holding her hand. Lauren's voice cracked slightly, but she pushed forward. The medical bills had piled up. Even with my 3 jobs, we had fallen behind. After she died, I lost the apartment within 2 months. I sold everything I could, including my mother's piano. The one she had taught me on. The one she had worked those 3 jobs to buy. Robert felt ashamed, remembering how possessive he had been about his hotel piano. How he had treated it like the most important thing in the world. I've been staying at a shelter for the past 4 months, Lauren continued. I'm still working, trying to save enough for a deposit on a new apartment. But it's slow going. Every time I think I'm getting close, something happens. A medical bill I didn't know about shows up, or I get sick and miss work. It's like trying to climb out of a hole that keeps getting deeper. She looked up at the audience. But the hardest part wasn't losing the apartment or living in the shelter. The hardest part was losing music. I would walk past music stores and my chest would ache. I would hear piano music from open windows and have to stop walking because it hurt so much. I felt like I had lost a part of myself. Lauren glanced at Mrs. Holloway, who nodded encouragingly. About 2 weeks ago, I discovered the Grand Hotel. I had been walking around the city after work, not ready to go back to the shelter yet, and I heard piano music coming from the lobby. I followed the sound and there it was, this beautiful grand piano and someone playing it well. Robert realized she was talking about him. His face grew warm. I started coming every evening. I would sit in the corner and just listen. It was the closest I had been to a piano in years. Just being near it, hearing it, made me feel human again, like maybe I wasn't completely lost. She paused and a small, sad smile crossed her face. 2 nights ago, during the pianist's break, I walked up to the piano. I didn't plan to. My feet just carried me there. I reached out to touch the keys and he yelled at me, told me not to touch his piano. Robert wanted to disappear into the floor. Several guests turned to look at him, their expressions unreadable. I understood why he did it, Lauren said quickly. It's his instrument. His job, he was protecting it. But in that moment, it felt like the universe was telling me that I didn't belong in that world anymore. That music wasn't mine to touch. She looked directly at Robert now, but then he came back. The next night, he found me and apologized. He invited me here, and Mrs. Holloway offered me the chance to play again, to remember who I was before everything fell apart. Mrs. Holloway stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Lauren's shoulder. And you've reminded all of us why we do this work. Thank you, Lauren. The applause started again, but Mrs. Holloway raised her hand for quiet. I'd like to make an announcement. Lauren's story is exactly why the Holloway Foundation exists. Starting Monday, we're offering Lauren a position as our artist in residence. Lauren's eyes went wide with shock. Mrs. Holloway continued. The position includes a salary, housing in one of our foundation apartments, and full access to our music studio and instruments. In exchange, Lauren will mentor young musicians from difficult backgrounds, teaching them what she knows and helping them navigate their own challenges. Lauren covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. The audience erupted in applause once more, everyone on their feet. Robert watched as Mrs. Holloway embraced Lauren, as other guests came forward to shake her hand and offer congratulations. He felt a complex mixture of emotions, joy for Lauren, certainly, but also shame at how he had treated her. And something else, a deep, uncomfortable realization about himself. He had spent 15 years playing that piano in the hotel lobby. 15 years of technical perfection, of following every note exactly as written, of protecting his instrument like a fortress. But he had never played with the raw emotion that Lauren had shown tonight. He had never let himself be vulnerable enough to truly connect with the music. He had been guarding the wrong thing all along. He had protected the piano while forgetting what the piano was actually for. It wasn't meant to be preserved behind an invisible barrier. It was meant to be a bridge between the human heart and the world, a way to express things that words couldn't capture. Lauren had remembered that truth, even after losing everything. And in 7 minutes of playing, she had taught him more about music than he had learned in 30 years of careful, controlled performances. As the crowd began to mingle again, people talking excitedly about the performance and Lauren's story, Robert made his way through the room. He needed to talk to her, to really apologize this time, and to thank her. When he finally reached her, she was surrounded by well-wishers, but she saw him approaching. She excused herself and walked over to meet him. "Robert," she said softly. "I'm sorry," he blurted out. "Really sorry. Not just for yelling at you, but for everything. For treating that piano like it was more important than people. For forgetting what music is supposed to be about." Lauren smiled, a real smile this time. "You gave me this opportunity. You could have refused when Patricia asked you to find me. You deserved it. That performance was incredible. I've never heard anything like it." "Thank you," she said. "That piece I played, I wrote it during my mother's last year. I never performed it for anyone. It felt too personal. But tonight felt like the right time." They talked for a few more minutes before other guests pulled Lauren away for more conversations. Robert watched her go, marveling at her grace and strength. The evening eventually wound down. Guests departed, servers cleared tables, and the ballroom slowly emptied. Robert helped Patricia organize the last few details, neither of them saying much, but both understanding that something significant had happened. As Robert drove home that night, he knew that Monday morning would be different. He would return to his piano in the lobby, but he wouldn't play the same way. He couldn't, not after tonight. Lauren had shown him what was possible when you stopped protecting and started sharing, when you stopped performing and started feeling. The piano was still his responsibility. But now he understood what that really meant. Monday morning arrived with autumn sunshine streaming through the hotel lobby windows. Robert walked through the entrance at his usual time, but everything felt different now. The marble floors looked the same, the leather couches were in their usual positions, and his piano sat exactly where it always had. But Robert saw it all through new eyes. Patricia was at the front desk, and she smiled when she saw him. "Big weekend," she said simply. "Yeah," Robert agreed. "Big weekend." He walked to the piano and sat down, running his fingers over the keys without pressing them. For 15 years, he had treated this instrument like a sacred object. Now, after watching Lauren play with such raw emotion, he understood how small his thinking had been. During his lunch break, Robert made a decision. He found Patricia in her office. "I want to do something different with my evening performances," he said. Patricia looked up from her computer. "I'm listening." "During my breaks, I want to leave the piano available for anyone who wants to play. Hotel guests, people passing through, anyone. I'll put up a small sign." Patricia raised her eyebrows. "Are you sure? That's quite a change from 'Don't touch my piano.'" Robert smiled, a bit embarrassed. "I was wrong about that. Music isn't meant to be locked away. Lauren taught me that." "I think it's a wonderful idea," Patricia said. "I'll have maintenance make you a nice sign." That evening, a small wooden sign appeared on the piano during Robert's first break. It read simply, "Please play. Music is meant to be shared." The first few nights, nobody touched it. Hotel guests would read the sign, smile, and walk away. Robert wasn't discouraged. He kept playing his evening sets, but now he played differently. He allowed himself to feel the music more, to take small risks with tempo and dynamics. Nothing dramatic, but enough that a few regular guests commented that his playing seemed more alive. On Thursday evening, during his break, Robert was getting coffee when he heard hesitant notes coming from the piano. He peeked around the corner and saw a teenage boy sitting at the bench, carefully playing a simple melody. The boy's father stood nearby, recording on his phone, a proud smile on his face. The boy played for maybe 2 minutes, made a mistake, laughed, and tried again. When he finished, his father clapped enthusiastically. They took a photo together at the piano before walking away, both of them grinning. Robert felt something warm spread through his chest. That's what the piano was for. Not just for perfect performances, but for moments like that. For joy and connection and memory-making. The next week, Lauren stopped by the hotel. She looked different. Well-rested, Her clothes new, her face relaxed in a way Robert hadn't seen before. She was carrying a leather bag and had a visitor's badge from the Holloway Foundation clipped to her jacket. "I wanted to thank you properly," she said when she found Robert, "and to see the piano where all of this started." They walked to the lobby together and Lauren smiled when she saw the sign. "Please play," she read aloud. "That's perfect. It should have always been that way," Robert said. "I just needed someone to show me." They sat in the lobby chairs talking for almost an hour. Lauren told him about the Foundation's apartment, small but comfortable with windows that let in morning light. She told him about the studio where she had been practicing, about the 3 students she would start mentoring next month. Her eyes lit up when she talked about the work ahead. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "These kids will be looking to me for guidance and I'm still figuring things out myself." "You'll be amazing," Robert said. "You understand what it's like to lose music and find it again." "That's exactly what they need." Lauren smiled. Mrs. Holloway said something similar. "She told me that the best teachers are the ones who remember what it feels like to struggle." Before she left, Lauren asked if she could play the lobby piano one more time. Robert gestured toward it with a smile. "It's all yours." She sat at the bench, and this time there was no fear in her movements. She played a short, beautiful piece that sounded like morning sunlight would sound if it could be translated into music. Hotel guests stopped what they were doing to listen. When she finished, everyone in the lobby applauded. As Lauren stood to leave, a little girl, maybe 7 years old, tugged on her mother's sleeve and pointed at the piano. The mother read the sign and nodded. The girl walked over shyly, climbed onto the bench and played Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star with one finger, concentrating hard on each note. Lauren watched with tears in her eyes. "That's how it starts," she whispered to Robert. Just like that. Over the following months, the piano became something entirely new. A businessman played jazz during lunch. A college student practiced scales before her audition. An elderly woman played songs from her childhood, her fingers remembering melodies from 70 years ago. And every single time someone sat down to play, Robert felt grateful that he had learned to let go. His own playing continued to evolve too. He started taking more risks, adding improvisations, letting himself feel the music instead of just executing it. Some guests preferred his old style and told him so, but others, the ones who really listened, noticed the difference. They heard something more human in his playing now, something more real. One evening in December, 6 months after that charity event, Robert arrived at the hotel to find Lauren waiting for him. She wasn't alone. 3 teenagers stood with her, all carrying instrument cases. "These are my students," Lauren said, introducing them. "They've been working really hard, and I thought maybe, if you didn't mind, they could perform a few pieces during your break tonight. Give them some experience playing in front of people in a low-pressure environment." Robert didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. I'd be honored." That evening, during his break, the 3 students played. One on violin, one on flute, and one at the piano. They were nervous and made mistakes, but they played with heart. Hotel guests gathered to listen, and when the students finished, the applause was genuine and warm. After the performance, one of the students, a girl who had played the piano, came up to Robert. "Thank you for letting me play your piano," she said shyly. "It's really beautiful." Robert smiled. "It's not really mine," he said. "It belongs to everyone who needs it." "That's what I'm learning." Lauren overheard and caught his eye. They shared a look of understanding, of having come full circle from that first difficult encounter. As the winter evening wore on and Robert played his final set, he thought about how much had changed. He had spent so many years building walls around his music, protecting it, keeping it safe and controlled. He had thought that was what being a professional meant. But Lauren had shown him something else. She had shown him that music was strongest when it was shared, when it was vulnerable, when it connected people to each other and to themselves. The piano wasn't precious because it was expensive or well-maintained. It was precious because of what it could do, the emotions it could express, the memories it could create, the bridges it could build between human hearts. The sign stayed on the piano. "Please play. Music is meant to be shared." And every evening as Robert took his breaks, he would watch from a distance as different people sat at that bench. Some played beautifully, some played simply, some played with confidence, and some played with shaking hands. But all of them played with something that mattered more than technical perfection. They played with the human need to create something beautiful, to connect with something larger than themselves, to be part of the endless conversation that music makes possible. Robert had learned the most important lesson of his career, not from a teacher or a textbook, but from a young woman in a worn jacket who had simply wanted to touch the keys one more time. She had taught him that the opposite of protecting isn't carelessness. The opposite of protecting is generosity. And generosity, he now understood, was what made music matter. Years later, when people asked Robert about his time at the Grand Hotel, he would always tell them about that Saturday night in the Grand Ballroom, about the performance that changed everything, about the woman who reminded him what pianos are really for, and then with a smile he would tell them about the sign. The one that said, "Please play." The one that turned a piano from his instrument into everyone's instrument. The one that proved that the best way to honor something beautiful isn't to guard it jealously, but to share it freely with anyone brave enough to make music.